All right, this is a video that I'm not kind of used to making so much. This is a video on preparation for a class in the foundations of project finance. And for me, it's a very interesting kind of thing to do. I believe that I will have people who are kind of new, perhaps, to project finance, maybe aren't in finance, maybe they're lawyers or other contract professionals or something else. I don't know what. And so, how would you explain project finance to somebody and make it a little more interesting? And how, for me, how do you compare project finance to other kind of finance? The other day, I had another little class, and at the end of the day, it was wonderful. It was in France. We took a step back. We sat around and thought, ooh, what are the benefits of project finance? Now, I've been thinking about this, and I decided, and I haven't really thought about this enough. But sometimes it's important to take a big step back. Now, I'm going to use this book I am writing. Now, this book is not project financed. This book is just a crappy investment that will never pay off, but maybe not. I'm going to try to discuss it. So, when I start, if I would imagine teaching a class in finance right now, I used to think a little differently about this, but right now I think it would be great to take a big step backwards and think about what you're doing in your whole life. And if you ask somebody, I imagine if I ask some hotshot investment banker, what is finance? I have no idea what I would get, but I would certainly get a lot of fast talking gobbledygook and big words and everything else. When I think about finance, I think at its very core, finance is about assessing an investment decision. Now, that investment decision could be investing in a stock and seeing if it's a good idea to invest in a stock or a bond, or is it a good idea to make a purchase or an acquisition or do M&A analysis on a company? Or should we make an investment in a big factory, and is the return on that kind of investment good? Now, when you make any kind of investment decision, you have to assess what's the cost of the investment and what the benefits of that investment are. And you can say, oh, okay, that's very monetary and all that, but you can also go even further. You can say, oh, let's say, well, I was just walking here, there was somebody running in London. They were running on the bridge over the Thames. And I thought, well, that person made an investment decision. That person decided, it's costly. I gotta get up early. I don't know how you would get here. Maybe you ride a bicycle here, and then you gotta get in your running clothes, and then you gotta take this pain to run. That's an investment. That's got a cost. And then the question is, what the benefits? What are the benefits? There are health benefits. Maybe you look better. Maybe whatever. You could imagine all the benefits you have. Now, whenever you make an investment, just realize one thing. You make an investment, and you kind of know about what the cost will be. Not always, but it has a cost. The benefits of the investment come after you make the investment. And those benefits, by definition, are uncertain. How did this jogger know she would the benefits would offset the costs? Who knows? How do we make that assessment of that fundamental cost and benefit decision in your life? Now, you can think about other monetary kind of investments. You could make an investment in education. You could make an investment in gambling. You could make an investment in advertisement. You could make an investment in the internet website. You could make an investment in employing somebody to do AI. That's a big thing. Each of those are investment decisions as well. In accounting, we don't call them investments. We don't call them CapEx because of these arbitrary rules we have in accounting, but they've got uncertain future benefits. And how do we assess something with an uncertain future versus a cost we know? We have to make a forecast and assess the risk of that forecast and do a cost and benefit analysis. And then I go even further. And what about investing in a child? And this was so nice the other day. I kind of, I don't know. I had a modeling class that didn't go so well. Maybe I thought it was fine, but some people complained about it being too advanced, maybe a little bit. And I shouldn't have said that, but whatever. When I invested in a child, I thought, oh my God, what's the rate of return on this investment? Oh, how horrible it is. All the pain I have to go through. I love my children, of course, but the teenage years, oh my gosh, and some other problems, and then I had grandchildren. That's how old I am. And I realized what a great investment this was. It takes a long, long time to get over an investment. Now, what am I doing babbling on about this when I'm supposed to be talking about the foundations of project finance? Well, now I'm going to refer to another chapter of this book, which is a very negative. The benefits don't seem to offset the costs, and I can't seem to make an investment properly in this one. But now we're going to talk about some other kind of investments. And project finance at its core is all about assessing whether we should make various kind of investments. Now, I took this from another person, and I hope maybe I'll expand the video a little bit when I do this. There are different ways to assess the cost and benefits of a major investment, and we're going to talk about really important investments. Now, when I came here today, again, it's just a lot of crap that I'm talking about a bit. I came here, I was able to walk 5 minutes to the train. I took the train to the tube. I took the tube, walked a couple of minutes. What a wonderful kind of experience this whole thing was. Other places I go, I have to rent a car if I'm traveling, or if I'm not. Unfortunately, I can't ride a bicycle. The whole system is set up differently, and maybe some places in the U.S. What happened was they made a disinvestment decision in what some people might call trams and other people call streetcars, because GM and Ford decided, we're going to get rid of all those things, and we're going to make our whole society car dependent. Those are all investment decisions. They're infrastructure investment decisions. France, a long time ago, maybe it's bad, maybe you argue for or against, it went more into nuclear power than other countries, and now we wait 30 years later or 20 years later and we see, is it good or bad? Well, it happens that we didn't worry about CO2 when we were building them. It happens to maybe be okay. Those kind of enormously long-term, can you imagine the way you have to think about a decision? So I'm pointing to this kind of slide. I'm just reading about what I was supposed to be talking about a little bit. Sorry about that. Those kind of major infrastructure investment decisions have an enormous impact, I think, on society. And the question I'm going to address in this short little video, it's not going to be quite as short as I wanted it because I'm babbling too long, but I want to address this question of, is project finance, I should say it like that, a better or a worse way to assess investment decisions than other ways. And now, when you think about this, when I ask people, in my class, tell me about, I just had one right now. This is where I am, actually. I ask people, tell me about yourself. Everybody had a finance degree. And then I said, okay, well, tell me about what you've learned. Has anybody taken a project finance class? No. Has anybody doing a DCF analysis? Yes. Has anybody made a model? Yes, just of a DCF analysis. My proposition for the rest of this discussion will be that the essence, the underlying ideas, the foundations of project finance are very different than other kinds of corporate finance, like using a DCF. Now, these days, I think if you ask about investment decisions, everybody would want to talk about NVIDIA and how they have a chip that will work or whatever if the has to be heated to 300 degrees and then it'll process all the AI faster and all that. And that's exciting. And there are all these billionaires that come out of it. And that's corporate finance. And then you make an investment in NVIDIA. If you were lucky enough to invest in NVIDIA, you would become really rich. Okay, good. And it's not, and maybe these kind of investment decisions in railways or energy, or maybe this one, which I don't really like, criminal justice. Oh my gosh, do we want to privatize criminal justice and use project finance as a way to make prisons? That's really what it was. So we have private investors encouraging the arrest of people to put them in their prisons. That's a little bit of a digression, but it maybe not that much. Okay, so this you can, I suppose, read this. I'm not. Now, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to talk about a couple of little chapters I have in my book to introduce this topic, and I begin with the definition of project finance. After that, I talk about it's like a theoretical, what's the best theory? It's not really, if finance is about measuring things, unfortunately. Is it better to measure an investment decision with project finance or corporate finance? I try to argue, and you can see from right now, I'm going to argue that there's some beauty of project finance that gets completely attacks and resolves some of these lingering, unbelievable, ridiculous ways we do a corporate finance. So that's a little bit of an outline, and then I'll have a little bit of discussion on the essence, not the essence, I use that word too much, but the two statistics we have in project finance and what they mean, IRR and DSCR, and they're a way to assess return and risk, and they're very interesting ways when you really step back. Okay, and here's my first point. Let's look at some decisions. And here's what project finance is sometimes considered, in my opinion. It's considered a form of debt. And if it's a form of debt, just stick that debt in and then do all your other methods. Put it in a whack. What absolute complete crap formula, because project finance, you can't measure risks and assume the risks don't change over time. How ridiculous is some of this standard finance, and this Bob Hamato, he sat in his smoky room many times. Re-leveraging and unleveraging betas, all this fancy stuff, okay? So here are some definitions, and I object to these definitions. One, the raising of funds on a non-recourse basis. Now, non-recourse sounds like some kind of fancy little term or something. Economically separable investment, which providers of the funds look primarily to cash flow. Now, that last thing is absolutely true. To service their loans, so they make it like a loan. Project finance is a loan structure that relies primarily on the project's cash flow for repayment, with the project's assets right and held as secondary collateral. Collateral is, well, you can put it in there, but it's not important. Cash flow is important. Financing of a particular economic, that's the one I repeated this one. I better modify this little thing. I don't want to, I think I put it twice there. Sorry about that. Project involves the creation of a legally independent project company. That must have been a lawyer who wrote that, with non-recourse debt. Ooh, it's all about debt. And maybe equity with some parentheses. And here's my point. With due respect to these authors and the above definitions, project finance is so much more. It's the whole essence of making an evaluation of an investment decision, understanding risk, and something even more important, the way it has been evolved. And now I insist, if I'm doing a course in the foundations of project finance, go back to the history of project finance. And the history of project finance is that we want to develop investments. We want to develop investments like those ones I showed you that define a society. They define a place. They define all sorts of things, where you're getting your energy from, but more important, all the transport alternatives, everything we have. Whether we should invest in that or whether we should put our money in buying Intel stock as the government. It's so much more. Project finance is a way to assess these decisions, and really, really importantly, it's a way, if we can finance something efficiently, not only do we make this investment, we make this investment efficient. And the way you make an investment efficient is you get into the whole ridiculous theories of capitalism versus socialism or communism. Let's not do that. But let's just say one thing that most of us, maybe not everybody, can agree on. If you make somebody take a risk and they get a downside risk, if they mess up, they're going to be more focused on doing that activity. That's ridiculous the way I kind of said it. I should have thought about that a lot more, but the way I think about that, if you want an asset constructed on time, you give a penalty for being late. That's called a liquidated damage in project finance. For some things, you give a bonus or a penalty if if it's a road, which let's build railways instead of roads maybe, but if the lane is out of service and under construction, and if it's under construction for 2 years versus 2 months, you give a penalty or an incentive. You're building a hospital. You're not going to hire the doctors, but you're building a hospital, and if the lights go out in the middle of a surgery, that's no good. You give all these systematic, and the way project works is number one, we have debt. We have a whole lot of debt, and we have a whole lot of incentives. And I could not come up with a really elegant definition. Nobody would write this in all these silly little videos. She said, write in the comments what you think a definition will be, blah, 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 blah. Okay, but those are some of the essences. And here's the big deal. The bank itself, or the lender, does a whole lot of work. And when they do all of this work, somebody outside of the company, some kind of, again, it's like a mixture of the government's things or private. Somebody does a very careful investment of the risks. They don't do this. What I'm doing right now is computing the EIRR, economic IRR on a Mozambique mini grids or something. It's very cool to do that, but it's a lot of BS because there's got no rigor. The bank says yes or no. I'm going to make an investment. If I make an investment in your project, I'm putting 80% of the money in the project. That is unique in finance. So that's kind of what I talked about. And no, this is another, well, I thought I had another chapter here. Oh no, I put it in the same chapter, I guess. And here's my little explanation, which is a silly thing. I've seen all these offering memorandums and beautiful things. I'm doing that right now. Oh, this is the greatest thing ever. Of course it is. We're going to reduce, if we build this thing in Mozambique, it's going to be great. We've got pictures of wooden stoves that could be used and health benefits. I really think it's fantastic. And we make a nice little PowerPoint slide. Should we really do this or that? Imagine you're on the board of directors and you have two people, and I've said this too much, you have two people making presentations. One is this beautiful PowerPoint slides, goes through betas and all this crap that you learn in finance. Sorry about that. Now you're getting a hint of where I'm going. The other one, you say, no. This lady, so that's the first lady. I can't point to it really because I don't know how to do that on a video. That's a beautiful PowerPoint slide. It's all fancy and nice, a suit and everything else. And the other, oh my gosh, I need to drink my coffee. It's really early in the morning. Oh God. The other person comes in, and she comes in late. And she's got a nice little earring on her nose and everything. And all she has is a note in the back of her. She pulls the note out of her pocket and says, I have a note from the bank that says the bank is going to put 80% of the financing in. Of course, you would believe the second presentation, and then she can just leave. And guess what? That bank is better than your company probably at assessing the investment. That bank has looked at 100 different investments or 10 different investments or 50 and has a whole bunch of data on the other investments, has experience of what went wrong on the other investments. You're making one investment, and the quality of information on the costs and the risks that bank gives you is invaluable. Now, I have to go up down here. That contradicts my hero. Down here, oh my gosh, I'm going to go on and on too much. That man is named Merton Miller. And that man said that banking, and he made he's just brilliant compared to all these other idiots. I'm sorry. Fama and these other Nobel Prize winners. Oh, shit. Well, whatever. Maybe I'm just... I shouldn't have sworn. Oh, okay. It's a totally different way of thinking. Mr. Miller of Modigliani and Miller said, let's focus on only what you really do in an investment. Let's only focus on what you actually do. Now, so whether it's whatever, in the video, whoever, make an assessment whether that's a good thing and whether NVIDIA wants monopoly profits. That's what everybody wants. Okay, don't start worrying about whether we're paying dividends or whether we're issuing debt or whether we're issuing equity. What a waste of time. Focus on what it's really doing. That's kind of nice, but in the real world, having these bankers tell you, somebody from outside of your organization with debt telling you yes or no, this investment is too risky, not in risk, is a wonderful way to assess the risks, the future risks of any investment. Now, let's talk about non-recourse. Again, non-recourse is some big word, and you can make these kind of diagrams that mean very little to me, so I stole kind of these diagrams from somebody else. When I think of non-recourse, I think it's not really true anymore, but I hope my daughter never listens to this. I'm going to pretend she needs some money. She sends me an email, and I'm the parent, and I will try to get her the money unless it's outrageous. And that's called a parent guarantee. And that's the way I think about non-recourse. If you've got a parent guarantee, then what she is going to do with that money, well, who cares? She got the money from the parent. If it's non-recourse, she is on her own. She is totally on her own now. She's wonderful, so please don't. whatever. Non-recourse is not just a word. It's not just a way of debt financing. It says when that bank makes that viability decision, that viability assessment has to be absolutely made without any mixture and pollution from other things. It's got to be, that investment has to be verified on a standalone basis. Oh, that is beautiful. That is really beautiful. And that's the beauty of project finance. We get these really important, big, long-term, very long-term projects. We get them assessed. We number one, have somebody do the risk analysis. Do incentives. We get people. We figure out some contract structure to make these things have an incentive to be efficient, which means we have risks, and then we take those risks, and we have somebody outside of the company assess those risks. And here's, at the end of the day, what I think is a big deal. The risks, oh God, let me get it out. At the end of the day, the financing we get with a whole lot of debt, and not only debt, the equity providers have to bid like crazy on a financing. We get a low cost of capital, which, who cares about low cost of capital? Well, I do. Because a low cost of capital, a reasonable equity return, plus most of the money coming from debt, means that a really capital intensive investment will have a reasonable cost to society. It won't cost too much. The train to London cost a little bit, but okay, whatever. Now I want to talk about things, how you can finance these long-term investment decisions, and we cannot finance something that's going to go obsolete or become out of fashion. It's got to be some boring long-term project. And okay, I hope you're stepping back and thinking, is it better to, well, no, my country didn't invest enough in AI. Well, sometimes I like it if you invest in a nice rail system for many, many years in the future instead of something that completely blow up or completely go obsolete. That's the kind of investments that will work with project finance, not others. I hope you can see project finance is a whole lot of debt, and now I just repeated kind of the issues of the issues of providing incentives, and this is my example of a financial model for a solar project. Now, I was thinking about opening a financial model for this video, but I'm not going to. I'm going to try to finish it up pretty quickly. But we have the SPV, and we have something called a project return here, and then we have the equity returns. We have different kinds of debts. We look at the cash flow and the debt service, and we have all these contracts, and you put the contracts here, and you see how are you getting the money from a price, and Mr. Sun, and you got to assess whether there's enough sun, and it makes sense that we have a price that's good for our society, and investors can get a reasonable return, and the debt gets paid back. That's all kind of in project finance. You start at the top here kind of, and then go down and whatever. And you should make every financial model with a little diagram like this. I'm just joking. You would never do that, okay? Now, here's let's compare project finance to corporate finance, because that's what people always do all the time. And you might have a nice little diagram here. Okay, project finance. And here's what it says. The financing, look at cash flows, look at the strength of a range of asset security, no limited guarantees, whatever that means. All assets can be used for security, duration. Project has a limited life, that's true. Corporate finance has an extended life. Good. Fine. Nothing wrong. Okay. Stole that again. I need to speak in complete sentences, unlike other people. Okay, and here's the way I think about it. I think about a grandmother, and a grandmother, for some reason, you've got a family, and the grandmother wants to know, how valuable is this family? Did I make a good family, or did I not make a good family? And a family consists of a lot of people, and the people have different ages. Some really young, some middle, some old. And each of these, now we think of each of these as a project. And each of these projects, when you're here, maybe you've gone through university, you've got a stable kind of life, you're trying to support these children, so you better keep your job. These people have a kind of boring life. Maybe they're finished with their investment. Maybe they're finished with their money making, or if they're not, they kind of have a stable income. These people could be teenagers or babies. Teenagers might be really highly risky, and other babies, we don't know what's going to happen. Maybe when you're in university, you're just getting to the stage with whether it'll work, or will you turn out to be something crazy. That's a corporation. Any corporation has a bunch of different assets with all sorts of different characteristics. Project finance is we concentrate on one of these assets. We concentrate on only one of these assets, and then we think, we know the assets go through different stages, and we assess the risk and the value of these assets. Now, in corporate finance, you don't have all the information on these assets. You have a financial statement, and it puts all this stuff together and has an accounting statement, and you have some historic accounting statements, and then you go to the end and say, oh my gosh, this person's going to have a baby, and this person's going to have a baby, and our family's going to last forever. Maybe we'll die out. Some families die out, but whatever. As this family lasts and lasts and lasts, you say, oh, we have to make some assessment of what the value of this corporation will be forever and ever. And when you're doing a cost and benefit analysis, trying to assess the risks and stuff all these risks into one thing called beta or the CAPM, or trying to make a terminal value calculation for this whole corporation or family, what a lot of crap. If we had our perfect life, if we had our perfect information, we would take these assets, value them separately as projects. That's okay. We could imagine doing that. And each one of them would have a different risk characteristics, and we could even get objective kind of cost of capital assessments on that is related to the risk. We would get that through bank financing, or even through objective data on how assets have been bought and sold. And then we'd have a future asset, and we'd have to do some kind of philosophy on, in general, how much can we earn on a future hypothetical kind of investment in the long run, and how it will grow. That's the difference. I don't know if I did that pretty well, but when you look at project finance versus corporate finance, that's what it is. Now, some big project like offshore wind, there's a company called Ørsted in Denmark. I'm sure they're very nice people, and they're very good people. But their stock price has gone down 75% from 1,200 to 263. And they have chosen to use corporate finance rather than project finance. And they make some kind of estimates of WACC. And if they do WACC, they must do beta. And then they try to make their decisions. And I shouldn't be that extreme. I think they do some project financing, so please, I don't want to get in trouble or anything like that. I'm just using them. What happened to them is they made one single error in one of their investments that I don't think was checked and wasn't project finance by definition, and they wrote off $5 billion, which was 38% of their whole equity capital. One bad one. And what we do in project finance when we have the banks check our stuff is we don't let that happen. Now, I think corporate finance is a bunch of magic potion. I'm sorry, the more I look at it in the future, when we do this terminal value, which is the biggest kind of component of valuation, we're all dead in the long run anyway. All the projects are all finished. Their management will be gone. The products will be obsolete. everything will be retired, and then we have to take all our cash flows that we go 5 years and then put a terminal value and then apply some kind of minimum rate of return that's supposed to account for the risk, the cost of capital. And we use something called WACC, and it's just such, when you get into this, it's undescribable. I've got to make a bunch of videos on that before I'm totally finished. And then you might use these comparable PE, EV to EBITDA ratios, but they are so distorted when you get into them. It's hard to describe, and they're based on they're not based on cash flow. Project finance, we have a different kind of thing. We don't need a terminal value because we have one asset. And once we can value that asset, once we have a objective cost of capital, most of the objective cost of capital that come from a bidding kind of thing where you can see that this cost of capital is kind of a pretty good way to verify things. And with all of our financial ratios, or two, DSCR and IRR, they're purely based on cash flow. Now, just to finish this off, what I'm going to talk about is a lot about the two risks. And when and I put my picture of Mr. Miller there, the equity IRR. And here's what I define as the equity IRR. I've said this way too many times. This wonderful lawyer in Malaysia asked me, what is this business with IRR anyway? Why are all these senior management so focused on IRR? What does it all mean? And I said, everybody knows that the IRR is the discount rate that makes the NPV equal to zero. Oh, sure. So that means when everybody's assessing an IRR, they're saying, what is the discount rate that makes the NPV equal to zero? If I have a higher discount rate that makes the NPV equal to zero, I like a project. If I don't, I don't. And I rank projects with the discount rate that makes the NPV equal to zero. Jump. When you go through it, and I'm going to go through this with a kind of a baby model, you see that an IRR is a growth rate. But whenever we have a growth rate and we receive a dividend in the middle, we have to do something with that dividend. It's impossible to kind of compute a growth rate. It's easy to grow the growth rate starting and ending point. But if you have stuff happening in the middle, how does that affect the growth rate? That's all of our problems with a growth rate, not the IRR. It's just an inherent problem with a growth rate. And this IRR really can mess up things. That's a little more of an advanced issue. But the IRR is the growth rate in your money. And that's why investors are focused on it. And that's all based on cash flow. And that's how you assess the value of an investment. And then we move I've got some of this stuff and I'm trying to get through this. Now, I had to take a airplane from Krakow in Poland to come here, and I flew on Ryanair. I know I'm making too much carbon in the atmosphere. I'm sorry about all that, but whatever, I'm trying to justify it, blah, blah, blah. Krakow was a really nice city. I've never been there before. I made a mess when I went on the bus. I got off the wrong stop once. So I had to decide, how much time am I going to leave to get to the airport? Now, I hadn't been in Krakow before. I know my personal situation that I make mistakes all the time. I go to Google Maps to see, how long it's going to take. But then I didn't know about Ryanair. They said, I tried to put something in the app, and they said, no, you got to get your passport checked differently or something like that. And I said, oh gosh, I don't know. So I left a whole bunch of extra time. That extra time I left is a risk assessment, and that's a risk assessment you make in your life. Every day when you set your alarm clock, you're making a risk assessment to say, I don't want to be late to something. So much of risk is really about time and something about money and time, and that creates anxiety in your life. When you really think about the anxiety you create, well, you can also get it from screaming at people and all that stuff, I guess, too. Risk is anxiety, IRR is happiness, okay? And the way if I had to say, how much time do I leave for this airport, if I had to say, oh, let's compute a beta capital asset pricing, oh God, some statistical analysis, let's take the Google Maps, and I wish they would put a normal distribution around the probability of being late to the airport. How ridiculous would that be? You make a judgment, and you make a judgment on risks according to how bad things can get, basically. And that's the DSCR. The DSCR is the cash flow you get in divided by the amount of debt service you have to pay. And if that cash flow gets all the way down to just barely covering the debt service, we have a DSCR of 1, we default. And we have to leave, and the banks want to leave enough buffer up there. And if you have a riskier project, you have more buffer. A wonderful man called Gabriel asked me, oh, what's riskier, solar, wind, or battery? I said, I don't know. How would I do that? Beta. Ooh, maybe we could do beta. The right way to do it is ask the bank, which you need a higher DSCR typically for wind, not always. That reflects increased risks of the wind. Battery, we don't kind of know yet because it's a new technology. Right now, it might have a high DSCR. Eventually, it would maybe have a much, much lower DSCR. And that's like if I go to Krakow again to the airport. Next time I go, I left way too much time. This time, but I could work on a financial model there anyway at the airport. Good. Enough. So that's risk. The way, let's just review for a second. Finance was all about making an investment decision. And an investment decision is about taking a cost now and having uncertain benefits. And we want to build infrastructure investments that are efficient and the right kind of investment, and we need to assess the risk of that investment because we have these incentives, and we need to get a reasonable cost of capital on those investments so that they can be good for a society. It sounds all great and all that stuff, okay? I don't know, maybe that's how I would think about framing the definition of project finance, okay? Now, how do we assess the returns, whether it's valuable to us, whether a rail system or an extra lane on a highway is more valuable? Well, that's not working quite right, but basically it's an IRR. Which one produces a higher benefit? Which one? That's the IRR. That's the growth rate in your investment. That's all anybody cares about when it comes to money. But then we have to say, is that IRR compensating for the risk, which is the major issue in finance? And I'm saying, if you have bankers give you the money for this, okay, if you have bankers giving you, I had to check the time, for this, they verify the investment, they do the risk analysis, and the way they do the risk analysis is using a buffer on cash flows. Don't think of DSCR, think of buffer. Don't think of IRR, think of growth rate on your investments, okay? And then we can get into so many other issues after that, and I'm stopping the video.